Number 10. Batman and Babs sitting on a rooftop? Or rather, doing more than just sitting on the rooftop really, which is exactly the qualm fans had about the animated film adaptation of The Killing Joke. While not in the comic, for some reason, an intimate relationship was added into the mix between Batgirl's Barbara Gordon and Batman's Bruce Wayne. Batgirl is the one who makes the moves after Batman decides to remove her from a case. In frustration, she fights him, and then fighting kind of turns into something more. For many reasons, Batman and Babs fans were obviously not fans of this weirdly forced ship. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that like button. Number 9. Death of Gwen Stacy. A moment that to this day is still often debated amongst fans, having left a dark mark on both them and Peter pretty much permanently. A lot of people for this one like to point out that Stan Lee later lamented Gwen's death, having claimed to not really have been focused when kind of signing off on that, kind of doing so offhandedly, not really realizing what he was like checking off before it went through. For many, they believe that Gwen was the one that Peter was meant to end up with, not with MJ, and that she simply suits him better. So the loss of her character was not only a tragedy for Spider-Man, but also all the fans that shipped the two of them together. Rest in peace, Gwen. Of course, I'm very much pro Mary Jane and Peter, so I'm not mourning it too much, but Gwen was a cool character. That's okay, we have alternate reality Gwens, so yay. Number 8. New 52. This is kind of a big one, because New 52 included pretty much everything in the DC universe, but this was a continuity reset that left a lot of people divided, especially when it came to superheroes and how they were changed by this new continuity. Some were completely rebooted while others had their backstories modified somewhat, but many storylines were disrupted by the change, while some weirdly kind of just continued on. So this is a very confusing time. Mostly, the main complaint was that it was a confusing time and many of the changes divided fans, with some absolutely loving them and others absolutely hating them.
Number 7. Purple Man. So, while Mephisto has a knack for manipulating people through wordplay, Zebediah Killgrave, the Purple Man, has the power of persuasion through pheromones that essentially lets him use words to completely override the willpower of others. While Killgrave used his power to commit normal crimes like robbing banks, he also more predominantly would use his ability to manipulate women to fulfill his own desires. And that, on its own, kind of bumps Purple Man up a notch in terms of really despicable villains, especially as through his manipulation of women, with his power, he has had many little purple boys and girls, and he then used them as what was essentially his own little army. It's sick and it's messed up. Now they eventually resisted his influence and used their own abilities to make Killgrave walk in front of a streetcar. While he was originally a Daredevil villain, Purple Man also became more synonymous with Jessica Jones thanks to the absolutely horrible way that he would constantly use her in the infamous Alias story. Purple Man is materialistic in just about every single way. Money, expensive clothes, fancy dinners, and nice hotels. Anything he wants is at his fingertips. All he has to do is ask for it. And having that sense of authority has given Killgrave an immense sense of entitlement, which makes him incredibly easy for us to hate. Number 6. Victor Zsasz. Batman has one of the best rogues galleries. We already talked about one of them. But more often than not, most of his villains are just regular people. Men and women who are the worst of the worst, which arguably makes them much more terrifying. Among some of the most fear-inducing would be the Beast of Gotham, Victor Zsasz. Zsasz is a sociopath, and one of the most unrelenting in Batman's lineup. He believes that human beings are mindless robots who attempt to give themselves purpose and meaning by materialistic and shallow means, and for that, they need to be ushered into the afterlife at the end of one of Victor's many blades in order to free these zombies, as he calls them. But in keeping with real-world serial killers, Zsasz will ritualistically dispatch his victims, leaving them in lifelike poses for the authorities to find. What is most striking though about Zsasz is that for every life he takes, he will mark himself with a tally on his own skin to remind himself that he is human and is not one of those zombies that he's taking out. Now I don't know if you noticed, but he is covered literally head to toe in these tallies. Now if that weren't terrifying enough, he is more than capable physically as he is mentally. He took down 4 police officers who were restraining him using nothing more than a pen and the very restraints he was being held with. He has also been able to get the upper hand on Damian Wayne, who was trained by the League of Assassins, which is nuts. But this guy is also unrelenting. When Zsasz was an Arkham Asylum, he had constructed a tunnel to escape out into Gotham to commit more crimes. And then he would go back to Arkham Asylum. What's up with that? I don't know. I don't know if Zsasz is as hated as he is feared, but he should be both. Number 5. Carnage. While DC Comics has Victor Zsasz, I think an easy equivalent in the Marvel landscape would be Cletus Kasady, the main host for the Carnage symbiote. Cletus has a pretty mysterious background, and all we know is from his own recollections, which could be completely fabricated. His past saw him shift from home to home, from horrible parental figure to horrible parental figure, some of whom he may have dispatched in his youth, and he went into the foster care system where he burned down an orphanage. I don't even know if I can say that on YouTube, I don't even know. He has a messed up past, which unfortunately leads to a pretty messed up person if they aren't given the proper treatment. Kasady became a notorious serial killer, a career choice that was improved upon when he found himself bonded to the symbiote Carnage. Together, these two caused chaos, becoming one of the main villains of not just Spider-Man, but also Venom. But you rarely see Carnage even work with other villains, except for Maximum Carnage, because of its destructive and selfish intentions. The only time you really see Carnage with other villains is when it's separated from Cletus, at which point it's only using those other villains for its own goals, like when it bonded to Norman Osborn, creating the Red Goblin, which was both absolutely terrifying and kind of really cool. Right now, Carnage is on a mission to become the new God Butcher, just like Gore and Null, probably in an attempt to oppose Eddie Brock as the King in Black. Number 4. Vulcan. Kind of like Cletus, the third Summers brother, Gabriel Summers, otherwise known as Vulcan, is pretty unlikable, but it's also not entirely his fault. Gabriel has been used by multiple different parties since his birth. His mother, Catherine Summers, had her life taken by the Shi'ar Emperor Deacon, or however he wants to pronounce it, but I guess I'm just going with that one, as a punishment for his father, Christopher Summers' actions. The Shi'ar took Gabriel and artificially aged him up and used him back on Earth. So, he was robbed of his childhood, which essentially meant that Vulcan has a tendency to act like a huge brat sometimes. After being saved by Moira McTaggart, Vulcan was drafted onto a team of X-Men that perished at the hands of Krakoa. Professor X then wiped everyone's mind of this team of X-Men, which was incredibly messed up. Now, because Vulcan absorbed the energies of his teammates, he was able to survive, but after coming back and fighting the X-Men and Xavier for some understandable vengeance, Gabriel took off into space and essentially took control of the Shi'ar Empire, marrying the black sheep of the Shi'ar royal family and using his massive power to beat the Royal Guard and take the life of Deacon. He then had huge run-ins with other galactic empires as he tried to extend the Shi'ar's reach. While he eventually returned to Earth and seemed to be chill for a little while, he went back down the path of villainy, and now he is being constantly used by Abigail Brand. So essentially, Vulcan, while sympathetic, is a huge unstable jerk who is constantly used by people he should be able to completely obliterate, and he not only ticked off the X-Men and Earth's heroes on multiple occasions, but also whole intergalactic empires. Number 3. Omega Red. During the Cold War, the mutant known as Arkady Rossovich was forced into a Soviet version of the Weapon X program in order to become a Russian super soldier. Arkady's mutant powers were both a healing factor like Wolverine and Sabretooth, and a unique ability known as Death Spores. Arkady could produce spores from his body that essentially killed people, and he did this a lot, basically becoming a serial killer, but in ways that were incredibly brutal. This put him into the ranks of some of the most despicable villains around, but once he was captured by the KGB and placed into the program I talked about before, he was given cybernetic enhancements and tentacles controlled by his mind, all made out of carbonadium, a metal that was more malleable than and almost as strong as adamantium. These enhancements made Arkady a much more capable killer, but the carbonadium was also incredibly toxic, to the point that without a synthesizer, Omega Red would need to drain the life force of another person once every single day using his tentacles in order to survive. The quest for a carbonadium synthesizer led him into conflict with Wolverine, becoming one of the main members of his rogues gallery, and those guys are usually the worst of the worst. Number 2. Sabretooth. While we're on the topic of Wolverine's villains, it would be utterly stupid to not mention his number 1 rival, Sabretooth. Victor Creed seems to be bad simply because he enjoys it. As a kid, he took the life of his older brother Luther over a piece of pie, and he was absolutely ruthless to his younger brother Saul, who he would make a habit of putting a beat down on, particularly on Saul's birthday. When his mutant powers manifested, it only made bringing harm to others even easier for him. He eventually took out his own father before going on a rampage through 3 Canadian provinces at just 13 years old. He would become a bit of a wanderer through his life, moving from different careers that allowed him to take advantage of his power in order to spill blood. He eventually turned his savagery towards Wolverine, who has taken the life of Saul. Sabretooth, in a really sick way, replaced Saul, his younger brother, with Wolverine, making it his goal to make Wolverine's life absolute hell, especially on Wolverine's birthday. He would beat Wolverine to within an inch of his life, and anyone Wolverine welcomed into his life, like those he would fall in love with, became Victor's newest victims. When he was forced into Weapon X alongside Wolverine, he became even more of a killing machine, and from there he basically became the muscle, claws, and teeth for many other villains. Not only is Sabretooth incredibly savage and insanely ruthless, but he's also just a mad dog used by the worst of the worst. And finally, in at number 1, it's Red Skull. For most on this list, they are hated for their savagery, the fear they induce, or how they despicably abuse their power. For Red Skull, it's very easy to acknowledge why he is incredibly hated. Johann Schmidt aligned himself, became the poster boy for, and actively continues to support one of the most famously infamous groups in world history. They are so bad that I literally can't even say their or their leader's name on YouTube without getting demonetized. If you have been in any history class that has ever talked about World War II, then you know who we are talking about. For this reason, the Red Skull is hated even among other villains. Magneto has famously trapped Skull in a bunker with no light and just 10 jugs of water for his past. The Joker, a villain from a completely different publisher who is on this list, has attacked the Red Skull for his involvement in World War II. The other thing about Skull is that he is the adversary for one of the most respected heroes in Marvel Comics, Captain America, the hero that even villains will listen to. It only makes sense that the adversary for Cap would be one of the most despicable and hated villains in the Marvel Universe.
Number 10, Black Widow. Okay, so obviously I love Natasha, but there are some pretty terrible things that she has done, especially the ultimate version of her. And for that, her character deserves some hate. Or maybe Mark Miller, who created the Marvel Ultimate Universe, deserves some hate, but regardless, someone definitely deserves some hate. Natasha has been known to use her feminine wiles to get her way and manipulate people only to betray them, but she usually does so for the greater good. In the Ultimate series, however, we see her get close to Tony only to betray him and the United States. And when Tony is genuinely surprised by this, as I think we all kind of were, she asks him what he expected, as she is after all a Russian spy. Wow, I mean, someone deserves the hate for the way her character is presented, at least. Seriously, Natasha? Why though? She also kills Jarvis in this series. Oh, and her and Tony have a sex tape. Oh, Ultimates. Number 9, Jason Todd. So in my mind, all Robins have deserved some hate at some point. They all have a bit of a brattiness to them that just makes you want to hate them. Jason Todd included. While he has now been redeemed in many fans' eyes when he went off to do his own thing as the Red Hood, he was previously disliked by fans. He only originally died in the comics because so many called into DC to vote him killed, after DC left a statement at the back of the comics, letting readers know that his fate would be left in their hands. After he was resurrected, he did the same thing a lot of Robins have done that royally bothers Batman, threatened to kill people, and then actually killed some people. Granted, his focus was to kill Gotham's criminals, but this still has never set well with Batman. And he really hates when his Robins can't follow the Bat family code of not killing. It's so easy, guys, just don't kill. Jason even tried to become the Bat in Bruce's absence, and did such a dreadful job that the Robins had to fight him to take it back. Everyone knows that job belonged to Dick Grayson. Number 8, Midnighter. Midnighter is violent to a fault. His abilities allow him to see the outcome of situations, which he could use to avoid violence and resolve things as neatly and cleanly as possible. However, while he uses his precognitive abilities to win a fight, he actually immensely enjoys violence, which means sometimes he'll drag out that fight. If you think I'm exaggerating, you should check out his Grindr profile in the comics. Yikes. His gratuitous violence is part of the reason why he deserves the hate, unless you are really into that sort of thing, and then maybe to you he just deserves more love. The hero out of DC's Wildstorm universe was once married to his teammate Apollo. While we were sad sad to see the gay couple's marriage dissolve. It seems fair given how much of a jerk Midnighter is. In the comics, we even see a time where he walks out on Apollo after declaring he already knows how this fight is going to end. Not even trying for a resolution? Talk about undervaluing your relationship. Number 7. Sony's Venom. I know some people really like this movie, so for some, my inclusion of Venom here will be a controversial choice. But for me, although I wouldn't use the term hate to describe how I feel about this film, this was definitely a movie that had some issues. Mainly, many fans were upset that they were doing Venom without Spider-Man, which admittedly doesn't make a ton of sense. And although they tried to make it make sense in the movie, there still begs the question of why does Venom have spider-like abilities in this universe if there's no Spider-Man? I guess just because the symbiote's an alien? I don't know. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. I agree. Number 6. Damian Wayne's fate. While there are many fans of Damian Wayne out there who over time came to love the character as Grant Morrison built him up, they were likewise disappointed when Morrison decided to then kill Damian. A lot of people were simply not fans of this because they felt that Grant Morrison simply didn't want to share the character they had created. Damian initially was stubborn and annoying, the son of Batman that Bruce had never really known that he'd had with Talia al Ghul. Having been raised mainly by Talia and trained by her and the League of Assassins up until the point that Bruce first met him, and then basically being left on Bruce's doorstep by his mother, Damian of course had a major attitude problem to start and believed that he was basically above almost anything Batman or the other former Robins wanted to teach him. Over time though, he came to respect the rest of the Bat family and was even beginning to really fit in when he died. He wouldn't stay dead for long, but the idea of losing him still did not sit well with fans, especially after we were made to love him, you know? Number 5. Short-lived leader. I think one of the moments that really rubs me the wrong way personally is when Monica Rambeau was forced to relinquish her spot as team leader for the Avengers. This is just something I don't vibe with because Monica was really only team leader for a very short while, and she was basically robbed of her position by a villain who had infiltrated the team. Like, how terrible is that? I feel like there have been multiple moments in the comics where Monica has gotten snubbed, and I personally would just love to see her as a leader of the Avengers team for a more lengthy period. I'm also hopeful that we might get to see her take on the role of team leader in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which could be really cool. I guess we'll have to wait until we get more information on the Marvels to have a sense for what the MCU holds in regards to her character's future. Number 4. Abandoned in the Asylum. I never would have thought this would have happened to Wonder Woman, who is usually loved by so many, but this is a thing that happened. And who's to blame? Of course, seemingly Steve Trevor, who drops Diana off at a mental facility and leaves her there without explaining that yeah, she's actually Wonder Woman. So everyone treating her there literally thinks she is insane for imagining that she is Wonder Woman, when she actually is, and that actually isn't what she needs to be treated for. She does need some help at this point, but not in that department. Irresponsible, if you ask me. Downright irresponsible. Of course, Diana would get out, but in my mind, it's still a weird plot point, Steve choosing not to or simply forgetting to mention that. Number 3. Depowered. Although I'm still of the mind that this plot point is leading us somewhere bigger, I do not give up on my dreams of Franklin getting repowered and being revealed as having lost his powers as part of some much larger purpose or plot. We aren't just there yet. And when this went down in Fantastic Four, with Franklin also being revealed as an imposter mutant, let's just say fans were pretty heartbroken. And some of them were pretty mad too. I wasn't mad, I was just kind of like, ah, interesting. Still waiting to see where that's going. I hope it's going somewhere. Number 2. Sony's Carnage. Oh boy. While Venom had at least some redeeming moments and elements and had a sense of fun when it came to the film, Carnage pretty much lost any charm that the Venom franchise had going for it. Let There Be Carnage was a Venom sequel that introduced Venom's powerful foe, Carnage. Carnage is the offspring of Venom, who ends up bonding with host Cletus Cassidy, a serial killer. Upon the two forming Carnage, they break out of prison and wreak havoc on the world. In the comic, this causes Venom and Spider-Man to team up in order to stand a chance against Carnage. However, we once again attempted to do a Venom movie without Spider-Man, so instead of Maximum Carnage, we got Let There Be Carnage, a story that wastes the potential of Carnage as a recurring villain and spends most of its time being extremely cheesy. Not even the appearance of Shriek, someone who I was generally excited to see on the big screen, could save this film for me. And while you might think Carnage isn't a superhero, so this actually isn't a superhero moment, Amanda, Sony is basically trying to sell us Venom as a hero without any of the character development established in the comics though. And this is a sequel to Venom's film, which is why I'm counting it, because it relates to Venom, so still kind of a superhero moment. Number 1, Martha. Some people genuinely liked Batman v Superman, and honestly, I'm happy for those people. Personally, this movie kind of broke my brain. Regardless of how you felt about the entire film though, I feel like there is one scene that stuck out for a lot of us in terms of it being memorable. For most of us, maybe not in a good way. Not in a way that made a lot of sense anyways. That's right, we're talking about the scene where Batman and Superman basically call into question why they're really fighting one another when they both discover that the other's mom is also named Martha, bringing the fighting to a complete full stop. Well, really, Batman's the one that realizes this and goes through a whole thing. What I really want to know is, why does the man who shot Bruce's parents have his gun inside of Martha's pearls when he fires? It's very artistic for the shot of them breaking, but it really doesn't make a lot of sense otherwise. Number 10, Wally West returns. When Wally returned in New 52, it was a rough time. Wally, prior to this reset, had a whole family and was in general one of the happiest heroes around. Wally has always kind of had this happy-go-lucky vibe to him. He has problems, but overall he feels like a very optimistic hero to me. However, times changed when he lost his family in the New 52. The really awful part of this was Wally would remember his family despite everyone else having forgotten what happened in the prior continuity. As a result, Wally as a character would have weird things thrown at him and in general just end up having a really rough time. It was a terrible thing for DC to have done to the character, and many Wally fans mourn the loss of the state of Wally West's life with Linda prior to the reset. Also, let's add in the fact that this also happened after the fact that we were deprived of Wally for so long, which, you know, DC being like, we got Wallace, which Wallace is great, not knocking it, but he's not Wally West, that's all. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we're doing here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to let us know that you love us by clicking that like. Just one click, it's all it takes. Number 9, Injustice Aftermath. I saw someone on part 1 to this list mention in the comments that they personally were not a fan of Injustice and actually really did not enjoy it. But that's not actually what we're focusing on in this point. Although, I just wanted to acknowledge that, you know, there are people out there that don't like it at all. Although I'm sure some were not fans of the Injustice universe and story, most people in general did like it. But I think what many of us can agree on is that we don't like what it did to the Superman status quo. Injustice made a very evil version of Superman popular, as in this universe, Superman ends up becoming the villain, a superhero who, after losing pretty much everything, decides to control the world and forcefully shape it by ruling it, in essence becoming an all-powerful fascist dictator. What this did to the Superman landscape afterwards was basically create a wave of evil Superman, with everyone wanting to, in essence, capitalize on the success of Injustice by creating their own version of an evil Superman. Number 8, Retconned Fate. Aunt May is one of those characters who just seems to live pretty much forever. This woman has been deathly ill more times than I can personally recall, I'm sure. It's been a lot. She also at this point has to be super old, as back in the 60s, the 1960s, she was a very elderly woman. How old is Aunt May at this point? Aunt May is Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man's aunt, who in essence raised the young man. So of course, we can't let anything happen to this sweet old lady. Still, there have been moments when it's been written that Aunt May does die. In fact, at one point, she like straight up did die. Imagine that, an old woman who finally passes on. I mean, it seems to make a lot of sense actually, but no, we could not let this happen. It would later be retconned that Aunt May did not in fact die, but that this was all a ruse as part of a Norman Osborn harebrained scheme involving an actress who was about to die and apparently was so method that she took on the role of playing Aunt May and dying for real as a part of her final acting gig. I don't know about you, but that's pretty ridiculous. Even for comics, that's pretty ridiculous, guys. Number 7, Sins Past. Sins Past has to be one of the most ick storyline moments in existence. It was a story that made canon an affair that supposedly happened between Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn. Of course, this affair would later be thankfully re-retconned out of existence, but this story still gave us some of the worst moments that exist in relation to the relationship between Gwen and Peter. Gwen apparently slept with Norman and conceived twins. The twins were born in secret in Paris, and their existence was kept a secret from Peter for many years. Norman in fact made the kids believe that they were Spider-Man's children and that Spider-Man was actually to blame for the death of Gwen, which may or may not actually be true. But I think the worst part of all from this story is when Peter finds out this dark truth about Gwen and her children. His reaction involves lamenting the fact that he wasn't Gwen's first. Peter, please. Like all of that. And Peter's like, why this thing? It's like, dude, why is that the part you're upset about though? What about these secret twin babies? That would be the first thing I'd be like, wait, my partner had secret twin babies? I didn't know about this till now. Number 6, Jason and Babs sitting in a tree? Not something any of us expected to get in Three Jokers, and definitely not anything I really wanted, I think. But hey, it's something we got anyways, as I guess a bonus? In general, Three Jokers was a highly debated series when it came to whether or not people actually enjoyed it. For me, I loved it, and I thought, just based on the art alone, it was pretty much well worth the wait, and we waited a long time for this book. The story was emotional, tense, mysterious, and exciting. Also that raccoon, oh my gosh. But there were things that even I was not a fan of in here, and this was one of them. Partway through the story, Jason Todd once more is attacked by the Jokers. And yes, I do mean plural, I mean it is called Three Jokers. You probably know what I'm talking about if you've read it, but if you haven't read it, you should go read it. It's really good. Babs gives him a place to stay and helps to nurse him sort of back to health afterwards. And it's during this time that the two bond. Now, while Babs is clearly coming from a place of, you know, being a friend and kind of like a sister to Jason, caring for him, and bonding over their shared trauma revolving around the Joker, Jason gets some other ideas for what could be between them. He actually attempts to basically put the moves on Barbara, but is ultimately rejected by her. At the end of the story, he also, even though he was already rejected, decides to leave her a note, basically declaring his feelings for her. Fortunately, the note does not end up getting delivered, instead being literally swept away. Probably for the best, to be honest. Number 5, Ultimatum. While many of us love the Ultimate Universe and what it did for comics, there are still quite a few of us who groaned at Ultimatum. In fact, I think pretty much it was a collective comic book groan. Ultimatum is a story that basically incorporates everyone within the Ultimate Universe, affecting almost every series and character in some way. The event happened as a result of Magneto attacking humanity, with various natural disasters taking place around the world, all at once as a result of Magneto flipping the poles. Yeah. The main thing it was criticized for was all the death that happened here, but not so much that it happened per se, but that much of it happened off-panel to many characters who fans knew and loved. So you would just like be reading your comic and they'd be like, oh look, that person's gone now, they died. It's like, what do you mean they died? I didn't see that. You're just saying they just died and it's just like, oh, skipping that part. Number 4, Superman Blue. So many fans were left scratching their head after this change was made to Superman in the 90s. The 90s was an interesting time for comics. We saw a lot of good stuff and a lot of, well, not so good stuff. For many, Superman Blue was part of the latter category. Superman Blue was a reinvention of the character that had energy-based powers. He also came with a completely new look and new version of his classic S symbol, with it resembling, you know, somewhat of like a lightning bolt, because, you know, energy powers. It looked pretty crackly. His cape was gone and so were his underwear. I mean, that is the underwear that he traditionally are used to seeing him wear over his tights. I'm not saying he was going commando in his suit. I don't know about that part. The look, however, only lasted until 1998. Superman Red was introduced as another version of Superman, with it being revealed that the two had basically split in twain. Shortly after though, they rejoined to give us back the traditional version of Clark we'd all come to know and love over the years and that everyone pretty much missed the entire time he was gone. Supposedly in honor of his 60th anniversary though, not because Superman Blue was terrible. Superman Blue, I think for many fans, was just not a thing they were into. Number 3, Miss Marvel's Big Terrible Send-Off. Oh boy, this was one that left a lot of Carol fans questioning what the heck just happened. In the fateful Avengers issue number 200, Carol, after becoming suddenly, mysteriously, and rapidly pregnant, gives birth. Her child grows quickly as well, and we learn that this child was actually a being known as Marcus Immortus, son of Immortus and alternate timeline Kang, who used Carol's body to basically travel to the world of Earth so that he might escape the dimension he was trapped in. So yeah, he's kind of his own father. It's very confusing. While there are a million red flags here, no one seems to really raise an eyebrow until the end of this story, with her fellow Avengers reassuring Carol that she should be happy about this random and mysteriously sudden child she's about to have. It's only when the child grows up and things start getting catastrophic as a result of his presence that the Avengers seem to think something here is wrong. You think something's wrong? Something's been wrong the whole time, guys. And even then, when Carol, seemingly still influenced by this man who she just gave birth to, decides, against all odds, you know, that maybe she actually loves him and will return to his home dimension with him so he won't feel alone. Everyone is weirdly cool with this and it's like, alright Carol, you found true love, girl, you go for it. It's like, wait, what? Giving us maybe one of the most messed up stories Marvel has ever given us. so I don't even know. Definitely not thanks for that. That's a weird, awful story. Number 2, Dick Grayson's fate. In Justice Gods Among Us, there was a lot we loved, but also a lot that we hated. Namely, what happened to Dick Grayson. If you're not familiar, let me tell you a story. Dick Grayson and Damian Wayne go to contain some criminals that broke out at Arkham Asylum. But of course, Damian, as Robin now, starts to take it too far because he's Damian, so that's what he does sometimes. At this point, Dick has graduated from being Robin and he is now Nightwing in this continuity. He tells Damian that his behavior is in essence un-Robinly, and Damian decides to rebel against him, throwing in a Scream-a-Stick at Nightwing. The stick strikes Nightwing's temple, causing him to become dizzy and woozy, and ultimately lose his footing, falling backwards onto a rock, which breaks his neck. That's right, Nightwing, aka Dick Grayson, a fan favorite among the DC universe, is defeated by a rock. I don't think I need to say anything else about that. I think that pretty much sums it up. Pretty terrible. Number 1, One More Day. Maybe one of the most disliked Spider-Man stories ever among fans, definitely one of the most triggering for many of us, is One More Day. One More Day is a story arc where Spider-Man's Peter Parker and Mary Jane ended up deciding to relinquish their marriage in a bargain with Mephisto. Why Mephisto wanted their marriage and why they would choose to sacrifice it to save the very, very elderly Aunt May, who, let's be honest, has lived so long and cheated us so many times that I'm beginning to think she herself is immortal Aunt May, remained somewhat of a mystery to fans, which was a big part of why this story was so infuriating. Sure, we love Aunt May, but as I said, she has lived a long and full life, and honestly, I don't think she'd want Peter and MJ to give up their marriage for the rest of their days just to save her. We know now that Mephisto likely wanted the marriage of Peter and MJ because he sought to prevent the birth of their child, who might be the key to his own more permanent, I guess, defeat and demise, even though I don't even think you can really defeat Mephisto permanently. Although this has only ever really even been hinted at still. And at the time, we didn't have this information at all. So it all felt very convenient and strange and didn't make a lot of sense. Namely, it seemed like this was more something being done to undo the marriage of Peter and MJ, simply so Peter could relive some of his bachelor days, narratively speaking. It felt like very much like a choice that we made just for continuity's sake as opposed to like for an actual narrative purpose. Granted, this also served the purpose of reinstating Peter's secret identity, which was probably the one actual useful thing we got out of it, because that was also part of the deal.
Coming in at number 10 is Doomsday. Doomsday is easily DC's scariest monster, and as such is more feared than hated, but I'd say the two can go hand in hand. Doomsday is essentially just pure destruction. He was able to bring down the Justice League and take the life of Earth's premier hero, Superman, in his first appearance. Doomsday doesn't speak, he can't be reasoned with, and the only way to stop him is to beat him harder than he will beat you. Problem is, Doomsday was created on the planet Krypton as the ultimate life form, tested against that planet's harsh environment and eventually against the Kryptonians themselves. Doomsday's whole life cycle involves it being killed and then coming back stronger than whatever killed it. Over decades that involved thousands of deaths, Doomsday essentially became a nearly undefeatable monster with no other thought process beyond destroying everything in front of him and moving on. All he does is punch things to pieces, and the only way to stop him is to beat him however you can and as quickly as you can before he does too much damage. Number 9. Joker. The Joker is the quintessential comic book villain. He almost outshines the hero he was created to oppose. He's a scene-stealing, fan-loved villain, but he is also one of the most psychotic, vicious, and unrelenting villains in Gotham City. Villains can't even attempt to take out Batman without having to think about how the Joker might retaliate. Teaming up with the Joker is just as likely to see you end up in the grave. He simply does not care about anything other than Batman, and will do literally anything and go through anyone and everyone to torment the guy. While the other criminals of Gotham's underworld may find him completely unpredictable and untrustworthy, because he is, he has such a powerful reputation as one of the most ruthless villains in history that he has their respect, if not their fear. But at the same time, he is one of those villains that we, the fans, absolutely love to hate. We love seeing the Joker show up because we know some absolutely bat crap crazy stuff is about to go down. Pun intended. Number 8. Mephisto. If you are a ruler of hell, you don't really need to worry about whether people like you, and honestly, it's probably way better for you if they hate you. You don't owe anyone anything, so it's not surprising that Mephisto is not really a well-liked individual in Marvel Comics. His whole shtick is manipulation, and he does it well, tricking people into doing things they would never normally do when they are at their absolute lowest. He has caused a whole boatload of horrible things in Marvel Comics, from the erasing of Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson's marriage, the creation of Green Goblin and capturing the soul of Dr. Doom's mom, Cynthia Von Doom, to being a major villain for the Silver Surfer, Thor Odin's son, and every single iteration of the Avengers throughout history. But while he plays a villain role, other villains aren't immune to his manipulations either, and so it's pretty easy to say that when anyone has a run-in with Mephisto, you won't see a very big smile on their face.
Number 7. Emma Frost. Now, Emma Frost started off her comic career as a villain, first debuting in the Uncanny X-Men number 129 back in 1980. She was the White Queen of the Hellfire Club. She eventually would end up joining and leading the X-Men for a bit. Here's the thing, now the X-Men have a better track record at this than other teams, but villains, reformed or otherwise, can be a hard sell for everyone to trust. She is also just as devious as her other half can be. Her and Cyclops were well matched. She lied about how he died in order for the mutants to declare war on the Inhumans, and while her methods don't always line up with the rest of the X-Men, she even reassumed control of the Hellfire Club in order to fix mutant kind her own way. But now it's House of X, or as some are arguing House of 10, hashtag House of X. We'll see how things shake up. Emma is hated for the lies, for the lack of trust, and her willingness to go back to her old ways, and use people to her own end. I love Emma, but some of the hate deserved. Number 6. Omni-Man. We're heading over to Robert Kirkman's indie mega comic Invincible for this number. Omni-Man appears in the first issue of Invincible and is the father of the lead, Mark Grayson. Omni-Man is the Superman amalgam of this universe, the hero. He comes from another planet, heralding a mission of peace and prosperity. He married a human woman and had a son, is part of a League of Heroes, and seeks to keep the world safe, or so it seemed. It turned out in a twist that occurred several issues in that Omni-Man had not been sent to improve the Earth but to conquer it. He bred with an Earth woman to create an heir and equal to help him in his conquest. And when it is revealed, he goes and kills most of the Earth's top tier heroes. This obviously turns the planet's population and the remaining heroes against him, including his own son, who would go on to have quite a complex relationship with him. So yeah, turning on the planet you claimed you were protecting? Hate deserved. Number 5. Professor X. Professor X has veered quite widely from the character he was when he first debuted back in the X-Men number 1 back in 1963. Since then, he has amassed a whole host of questionable actions. It's been revealed that he's repressed memories, hidden the sentience of the Danger Room, mind-wiped people like erasing Magneto and creating Onslaught through the activation of the dark portions of his mind, being part of secret clandestine dealings. Over the years, a lot of his students or allies have come to hate him because of the lies and breaches in trust, compounded by the image he presents of himself, which can come across to some people as holier than thou. Xavier now goes by X, as he is Charles's mind and Phantom X's body. This is following some Shadow King shenanigans. Honestly, these betrayals cut deep, and for those who do hate him, it makes sense. No judgment here. Number 4. The Homelander. That's right, the boys. So this applies to comic Homelander and TV series Homelander, who both abuse their power quite a bit in different ways, but heinous ones. The Homelander is an arrogant, self-centered, false hero. He is manipulative, and for those who know who he really is, the hate is deserved. To find out, your heroes are sexual predators, murderers, cold, calculating cynics more interested in making a profit than helping, are untrained and regularly cause deaths because, well, yeah, that's a lot of reasons to hate. And maybe for some to form some kind of secret team to keep an eye on them. The Homelander may be a bit more sympathetic in the series, a tiny bit, just a smidge, but he still deserves most of the hate he gets. Pretty much all of it. Number 3. Cyclops. So a lot of you are quite salty that Cyclops wasn't on part 1, like it was a travesty. So Cyclops, what a journey. Now I like Cyclops, but he is a jerk. But that's part of what makes him interesting, to me at least. Cyclops was one of the original members of the X-Men and the de facto leader for a lot of the points of the team's history. Here's the thing, Cyclops takes an antagonistic approach to leadership. The person you set yourself up against a lot of times rather than the person you are inspired by. This results in him oftentimes being cold and not that empathetic. Add to that his rigidness and desire to please authority figures, and he has a lot of traits people dislike in real life, and it also comes across in the comics. Then as it went on, Cyclops, oh boy, he's gotten pretty dictatorial and sanctioned all kinds of things, is willing to separate kids from parents, and on the whole has just become someone you need to walk on eggshells around. There's a baseline of Cyclops from lots of people within the Marvel universe, and as much as I like him, it makes complete sense. But you need characters like that, it's an interesting contrast. You're definitely not going to gonna forget Cyclops anytime soon. The fictional world needs a jerk or two. Number 2. Batman. Now I love Batman, many people do, but in universe he has his detractors, especially modern post-identity crisis Batman, which is when canonically you started to see a real shift towards paranoid contingency plan Batman. There have been numerous plots about Batman having a plan to take down his allies. Most notable is Tower of Babel. Everyone else here on staff says Babel, and now I live in a world of uncertainty. Batman is tracking people, friend and foe alike. He will go out of his way to defend his enemies, even the Joker, and this has not endeared him to people. Such as the plot where Batman argued that the Joker shouldn't be executed. How do you think Commissioner Gordon felt about that? Let's not even visit Jason. He's at home flipping a table. Even Nightwing hated him for a while after he fired him from being Robin and replaced him very quickly after with Jason. Guy hates him, one punch and all that. To some of his allies, he's an uptight, paranoid stick in the mud, and they worry that one day he could snap, which he also has a contingency plan for. Batman is complicated, but I'm a sucker for him. What can I say? Give me all the Bat Dad. I'm basic. It's fine. Where's my pumpkin spice? Don't get triggered. Enough of us love Batman to make up for the people in canon who hate him. Number 1. The Plutonian. We're going indie for number 1. We're looking at Irredeemable, an entire series dealing with the breakdown of this title hero. The Plutonian is a dark look at what could have been if Superman had not had the temperament to be a hero, coupled with a series of unfortunate events happening to him, such as revealing his secret identity to his lady love, only for her to reject him and spread his identity to the whole world, destroying his life and forcing him even further into isolation. The Plutonian ends up going on a killing spree, destroying the world's heroes and innocents alike. In fact, the title is a hint to the fact that he has become irredeemable. While they do a good job exploring how this all happened, for those who hate Plutonian, it makes perfect sense. He's terrifying. Superhearing was a part of all this. I warned you all about the superhearing.
Number 10. Batman. In real life, almost everybody loves Batman. He's probably the most popular superhero in the mainstream at this time, with only maybe Spider-Man and Iron Man being as beloved at the moment. In the world of the comics, people tend to have a much more mixed reaction to the Dark Knight. Typically, the people of Gotham are very split on the Batman issue, with a lot of civilians and even the non-corrupt cops he works with having resentment for having to work with a vigilante. The thing I want to focus on more so is the effect he has on other superheroes that he works with. Due to his rather cold and gruff exterior, a lot of his teammates aren't aware of his soft, gooey interior and have trouble connecting with the loner who has like a dozen kids. Adding to this issue is the fact that Batman is always making elaborate plans to take them out in case they go rogue. This isn't a bad idea, and it has served him well, but that doesn't mean it hasn't stirred resentments from his fellow Justice Leaguers, especially after these plans were stolen by Ra's al Ghul and used against the team in the Tower of Babel arc. Some of the people who hate Batman the most are Green Arrow and the Guy Gardner Green Lantern. Number 9. Booster Gold. Michael Carter was an ordinary young man from Gotham City in the 25th century who became a college football star. Once he was caught throwing games for money, he was expelled and sent to prison. Upon his release, the only job he could get was as a security guard in a museum. He was inspired by an exhibit on 21st century superheroes and stole a supersuit and a Legion of Superheroes flight ring and went back in time to become a superhero. He is notable for being a shameless sellout, who would frequently engage in brand endorsements to make money and feed his massive ego. Due to him being a hero for all the wrong reasons, a lot of the other people in the DC universe, civilian and hero alike, really look down on Booster for his frivolity and meritless ego. He has a few good friends, such as the Ted Kord Blue Beetle, and over the years he has earned a bit more respect from his peers, but he is certainly not held in the same regard as someone like Superman. Number 8. Northstar. Northstar and Aurora are mutant twins who have the same powers of super speed. Jean-Marie and Jean-Paul Barbier were separated early in life when their parents died in a car accident. Jean-Paul ended up in foster homes before eventually becoming an Olympic skier, while Jean-Marie ended up at a strict Catholic girls' boarding school, with the two being unaware of the other's existence until they were recruited by Alpha Flight. Northstar joined the team in order to spend more time with his sister, but otherwise had no interest in superheroics or his teammates. He would frequently insult his teammates to their faces, thinking himself above them, which led pretty much every other member on the team to dislike him, with him getting in frequent physical fights with Sasquatch. The only member of this team who could put up with him was his sister, and after he implied that she was a loose woman for having a relationship with Sasquatch, she hated her brother too, refusing to interact with him or even speak to him unless they were in the field and needed to strategize. They eventually patched things up and Northstar mellowed out a bit once he came out of the closet, but he is still quite a rude jerk sometimes. But hey, he's Quebecois, what do you expect?
Number 7. Captain Ultra. Captain Ultra may have been lurking in the background, but that doesn't mean he doesn't deserve some hate too. The only reason he is ranked so low on this list actually is because he is a background character. Other than the fact that he has amazing powers, everything else about him kinda makes the reader and the characters want to hate him. He is often presented as being cocky and arrogant as a hero. His costume is also pretty heinous. Beyond that, even other heroes in the comics tend to try and distance themselves from him. They usually aren't perceived as liking him too much. He initially lays claim to Hellcat when he meets her because he's attracted to her, as though she is some kind of object that, he could lay claim to. And he attacks the Avengers. Sure, he's part of Wonder Man's Revengers at the time, so it comes as no surprise, but his reason for joining the team is because he was jealous of the Avenger team and held a grudge against them after they denied him membership. Basically, Captain Ultra is an overpowered whiny baby. I hate whiny babies. Just kidding. Babies are fine. Number 6. Superior Spider-Man. Some people have expressed that Spider-Man gets hate from other Marvel heroes and that he gets some audience hate for his love life. While I would agree that this can be a bit of an issue for the web-slinger Peter Parker, I don't think any version of Spider-Man has ever seen or deserved as much hate as Superior Spider-Man. Some may want to argue that Doc Ock's version of Spider-Man can't be seen as a hero due to the fact that Doc Ock himself is so villainous. But I would argue that Superior Spider-Man represents a merging of the two minds, and that his goal was to be a better hero than Spider-Man himself. Well, that and, avoid dying. From trapping Peter Parker's consciousness in his dying body, to the violent ways he decides to dole out justice, Superior Spider-Man has received a lot of internal and external hate for his behavior. Beyond that, he pridefully boasted that he was the best Spider-Man, but then could not even stop the Green Goblin. Also, he deserves some hate for punching Black Cat and knocking out one of her teeth. Number 5. Iron Man. Well, we may all love Tony Stark today due to Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of him in the MCU. Let's be honest, Robert Downey Jr. is basically Iron Man. We also have to acknowledge some of his history, and it is some of his past choices that haven't always made him quite so loved by fans and fellow Avengers teammates. Let's go to one of my favorite events to lovingly hate, The Crossing. In this event, Tony was the bad guy after we found out that he was working for Kang the entire time. The Hail Hydra scenario before that was a thing. Either way, equally awful. His involvement in the storyline was also kind of beyond bizarre. What's worse is that this isn't the only time Tony's been presented as the bad guy. Nope. Let's not forget the events of Civil War, where he played Captain Marvel's role a la Civil War II, being the bad guy who sought to control and restrict all supers. He was also quite villainous in the events of Superior Iron Man, which explored a reality where evil Tony was able to shield himself from Scarlet Witch's spell to undo the weird superhero supervillain persona reversal that she had actually caused. He did a thing that any millennial would condemn him for: offered people a free app. But the app wasn't really free. It was just a trial period. And after it became crazy popular, it was an app after all that allowed you to, change your appearance, and the trial period had ended, it charged people $99.99 a day to keep using it. No! Number 4. Captain America. You didn't think I was going to let Cap off that easy though, did you? Just because he was the good guy in Civil War when he went up against Tony doesn't mean that he's particularly any better when it comes to his dastardly deeds. Cap, after all, has had his own fair share of hate tossed his way by characters in the comics. And outside of the comics, he does occasionally get labeled as a safe or boring character. And while I see that, I don't tend to find it particularly problematic for him, as the things people hate him for seem so ingrained in his being. Ignoring the whole Hail Hydra event, there are still plenty of deeds that have made other heroes condemn Cap in the comics. Let's take a look at some of them, shall we? In the events of Civil War II, he concocted a plot to kill Hulk, to protect the Earth from a simple potential future. In Civil War I, he severely beat up Frank Castle, who refused to fight back after the Punisher killed 2 villains. What makes that really awful is that Frank refused to even take a swing at Cap, and rather than throw a few punches and just call it quits, Cap decides to beat him to a pulp. And then within the wheelhouse of Hydra-related evil deeds, he also killed his BFF Bucky. No! Number 3. Punisher. What's worse than killing a few X-Men? How about killing all of the mutants, including the Brotherhood, with a nuke, while pitting them against one another? That's just straight up cold. This happens in the one-shot Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe. That's right, if you thought Deadpool was bad, Punisher was killing the Marvel Universe before it was cool, in the mid-90s. Beyond this, Punisher has also been a character who has gotten a lot of hate as a result of him being too violent. He's often seen as a character that represents an obsession with violence and the belief of an eye for an eye. I won't lie, I do feel bad for Frank Castle, but what he stands for as a hero in light of the issues we face in the real world modern day make him problematic and definitely deserving of at least some hate. Number 2. Superman. There are almost as many reasons to love Superman as there are to hate him. One thing his character suffers from is the goody two-shoes syndrome, similarly to Captain America. That is to say, he's kind of boring, good to a fault, predictable. Except for when he is not and is a complete jerk for no reason. Don't believe me? If you go back to the 50s and 70s in the comics, Superman really wasn't that great of a guy at all. Sure, he saved the world, but he also adopted Jimmy Olsen only to criticize and torment him. Granted, we later find out that because he'd heard a prophecy that harm would come to his son, but rather than tell Jimmy this, he simply is a jerk to Jimmy until Jimmy decides he no longer wants to be Superman's son. And sure, that was for a somewhat noble cause, but what about all the times he's tormented Lois Lane? There's a time in the Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane series where he actually breaks up with Lois just to elicit and capture an emotional response from her, so he can prove to a film director that she should play herself in a movie about Superman's life. Wow. And let's not forget what the alternate storyline Superman Red Son teaches us about Superman's potential for evil and red fascism. Yeesh. Number 1. Hank Pym. You asked for him on part 1, you asked for him on part 2, and I heard your cries of injustice. Many of you have brought up that he beat his wife, Janet, which is also hugely problematic and reason for fans to hate him. This happened in the original Avengers series and resulted in him being kicked out of the Avengers, and Janet deciding to divorce him. As strange as it sounds, this altercation actually seems like nothing when compared with what the ultimate version of Hank did to his wife. After getting in an argument, the Wasp shrinks down to get away from him, and he assaults her with bug spray. While she coughs up toxic fumes, he also sicks an ant army on her. This fight in the Ultimate series was even worse and left Janet hospitalized, leaving Hank hated by readers and by characters in the comics. Number 10. Doctor Doom. As much as I personally love Doctor Doom as a villain, he has done a slew of messed up things, and I don't just mean in the way of terrorizing the Fantastic Four and wanting to take over the world. His goals for world domination may even be super noble. However, the way he goes about it is usually all wrong. When he rules Latveria, the place is peaceful, but he also uses mind-controlling dragon tattoos. He also can be seen invoking a historical and old sovereign right in his land of Droit de Seigneur. If you are unfamiliar with this, it is something that real-life supervillain Roman Emperor Caligula also did. The right to take any woman's first night with her betrothed for yourself. Dr. Doom's interpretation of this law is even worse. He can sleep with any woman of Latveria at any time he wants. Ugh. Number 9. Lizard. While I usually feel pity for Dr. Connors, he's kind of a two-bit villain. His premise of being a doctor and scientist who works hard to grow back his lost appendage makes sense, but when he turns villain, his plans are rather, lackluster. Granted, you can interpret this as his animal mind taking over, but the idea of a brilliant man who turns into a dumb animal who is often defeated is just not very interesting. In Sony's The Amazing Spider-Man franchise, his plan is to transform the whole city into lizards. Why? Because he can. Because he's a lizard. Like, WTF. His plan isn't terrible, but his motivation seems pretty weak. And when he does manage to pull off some of the most dastardly things possible, it is often more harmful to him than anyone, making Connors better suited to be presented as a struggling hero. Like in the story Shed, where he loses control and eats his son, and then transforms back and has to deal with that. Wow. Number 8. Morlun and the Inheritors. So a lot of people are not huge fans of Morlun and the Inheritors, especially in regards to their return in the Spider-Geddon arc. And I get it. People felt like Morlun was a stronger villain without the Inheritors, and the Great Web, and you know, all of it. I mean, sure, vampires can be cool. Morlun is terrifying and intimidating, but then you had to go in and bring like a whole family and just make it about the fact that they like just want to devour spider totems because they're hungry? Like, I get it. We have Galactus, devourer of worlds, and he is a villain who is enjoyed by the masses, but he also devours like whole worlds, not just alternate versions of Spider-Man. Beyond that, Morlun is cheesy. He and his family, who let's be honest, look like they belong at a steampunk convention. If we're going steampunk, Lady Spider can come out to play, but let's leave the inheritors at home, shall we?
Number 7. Deadpool. So Deadpool is a fan favorite with many people, but in universe, other people can't stand the merc with a mouth. They think he's insane. He has few friends. But you know whose friendship he didn't have to bribe? Cable. He had to bend over backwards for Spidey's, but that is neither here nor there. Most people in the Marvel Universe find Deadpool annoying at best and dangerous at worst. Deadpool can be dark and he kills regularly and is up for hire. Just because, oh, he was married and oh, he had/has a daughter. Kids are always just one reboot away from being retconned out of existence. Less so at Marvel. At Marvel, it's more likely they're going to be sent outside the timeline to be hyper-aged. Again, Cable. At different points of Deadpool's history, he didn't even have his memory in order. He couldn't remember killing. In his alternate universe stories, he's killed all of the Marvel Universe, even breaking the fourth wall to come for the writers. He can be abrasive, intrusive, and hinder rescue situations. So yeah, it's completely understandable why other heroes and characters find him hard to be around. Even people that do like him need a break. It's why characters who can stand him stand out so much, and of course, shipping. Spidey Pool is huge, bigger than Cable Pool, even after Deadpool 2. I need more Cable Pool. Their team-up comic before they get divorced is everything, and they call it a divorce, that's not me doing it. Number 6. Booster Gold. Booster Gold has had quite the journey in comics, and is, confession time, one of my favorite heroes. For a time, he was my favorite. Also, Heroes in Crisis did him no favors, or that Batman arc, The Gift, but I blame Tom King for that, not my Booster. He first debuted in Booster Gold #1 back in 1986, and was from the future, the 25th century, so actually the same time as the Reverse Flash. Fun fact. Booster came back to the past to pretend to be a hero because his life was falling apart. He'd been caught throwing sports matches, so he was working as a security guard at a museum, where he teamed up with a security robot, stole a bunch of tech, and went back in time to be a hero. But his real goal was to get famous. Booster was in it for the money and the fame, and he wasn't shy about letting people know about it. This led many to dislike him, and his untrained nature meant he wasn't the best in a fight. And he drew in so much press to them, by always staying for interviews and actively clamoring for them. Yeah, Batman hated him at the start. But over time, Booster would come to take his responsibilities seriously, and get caught up in some serious time travel shenanigans, and learn that, well, he can't just do what he wants, and the fame isn't worth anything without the people you care about. Ted Kord's death messed him up. But then, Rebirth. Rebirth Booster is not okay. He's more unstable, he is less responsible, and a bit back to being almost basic Booster. And also, the rest of the heroes don't like him too much again. Poor Booster, he's taken back to base so often, and whenever he gets adapted, it's always straight up 80s Booster. So yeah, depending upon the era, the hate for Booster 100% justified, especially by heroes with a very defined moral mission. Number 5. Raven. So Raven has a very specific complaint, usually by other teams, not the Teen Titans, though it does happen. And that's that she can't be trusted because of her father, Trigon, and how she is a conduit for him. And also, she has been overtaken by her dark half before, like the time she crashed Starfire and Dick's wedding and then made out with Starfire. Kelly talked about it in her scary Teen Titans facts list. Raven is an empath and has immense power. She is a powerful villain when she gives into her darker impulses. So it's understandable that certain heroes don't trust her, and if you go evil, well, I'd be cautious too. I'm with Batman, like not to that level of what if I had to kill all my teammates, but if you went evil once, it could happen again. Number 4. Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers. You need to be specific, there have been multiple Captain Marvels, and Shazam was actually the first Captain Marvel. Go Billy! So Carol's introduction to the MCU was controversial, but we'll leave that aside for now and focus on comic Carol, Captain Marvel. So Carol became Captain Marvel in 2012. It was super recent in comic terms. Before that, she was Ms. Marvel. Her and Tony were friends. That matters in a minute, bear with me. When she became Captain Marvel, her character was changed slightly. She was made more aggressive and dominant, but the really big changes came during Civil War II. Listen, you don't come out of Civil War looking good. Just ask all the people from Civil War I. And Carol was pretty fascistic in Civil War II. She played the role Tony played in Civil War I, and people came out of that hating him. From commanding Ms. Marvel to set up essentially a teenage Gestapo, and also very much overstepping boundaries in the life of a girl who admires her to the point that she will lie to her parents and family so that she can patrol at night rather than do her homework. Also, she beats Tony into a coma, and this really gets people because Tony was on the upswing of liking him since the MCU revamp. So people liked Tony at that point. So yeah, it just wasn't a good look. But the thing is, in canon, just like the last Civil War, people just had to get over it. The thing is, Captain Marvel's a little different, and this is a bit more fan hate because most people in the Marvel Universe got over it fast. A few bring it up now and again, but she has like post-rebirth, his coming back to life rebirth, not DC rebirth, Hal Jordan protection. This happens when writers want a character to do well, so they can't bring up things that have happened in the past, their mistakes. Captain Marvel has been rebooted numerous times, at this point multiple #1s in the span of 6 years. She's ended up becoming a controversial character, and some people stay away because they just don't want to deal with it. I really liked her past arc with Tony where he helped her overcome alcoholism, but those days are long gone. But he's over it, he calls her Care Bear now. It's okay, Care Bear. I don't mind that coma. Number 3. Reed Richards. If you've watched my videos for a while, you know that me and Reed, we have beef. I'm a closet Fantastic Four villain. But Reed has done a lot that has made many in the superhero community side-eye him. He was on the Illuminati, that secret team that was trying to preemptively stop threats. He was part of that Council of Reeds, which had far too many evil versions of him on it for my comfort. He has a cache of some of the most powerful items in the Marvel Universe. Well, had. There was the portal to the Negative Zone in the Baxter Building. He exposed the members of the Fantastic Four to the cosmic rays on purpose. He helped build that alternate dimension prison for heroes who wouldn't register during Civil War I. Him and the Fantastic Four were put on trial for all the things they've caused. But, and it's a big but, he has recently been turned into Nice Guy Reed. You know, after God Emperor Doom and seeing his whole family die. He's turned over a new leaf. Seeing the Maker, the 1610 Ultimate Verse Reed, who is now evil, helped with that too. But he is Reed. His inventions and genius are calling. When people side-eye him, I get it. Deserved. Number 2. Hal Jordan. I love Hal Jordan, this is no secret. I also wish he had stayed dead. That too is no secret. It's complex, I know. So Hal went rogue after the destruction of Coast City during the whole death rebirth of Superman in the 90s. He also grew Reed Richards' hair streaks, always a bad sign, ended up killing the Corps and Sinestro, died in a quasi-redemption arc burning in the sun, then was the Spectre, then came back to life. The return was awesome, there was an emotion spectrum, eventually a Sinestro Corps war, but here's the thing. If you still distrusted him, you got flack for it in universe. Batman is treated like he's being extra for not trusting Hal when he literally killed the whole Corps. But what's happening with Hal these days? Well, he just destroyed the Corps, again, after he tried to arrest God and punched him in the face, then killed an innocent man. Green Lantern is interesting right now. They're all gonna be black stars, and it's cause of Hal. Yeah, I can see them being pretty mad about that. Hate, justified. Again. Number 1. The Hulk. The Hulk first debuted in The Incredible Hulk #1 back in 1962, and he's caused a lot of damage. The Hulk is a monster, something the immortal Hulk shows off to great effect. Yes, he has been heroic, and when in control he can do great things, but that slips a lot, and pretty much all his friends have tried to hunt him down, and faced off against him at one point or another. He has whole task forces designed to take him down. He is feared even by his loved ones. He has multiple Hulks, with some more deadly than the ones people normally face inside him, and yet She-Hulk recently told him that he was petty for being jealous of her, because people hooted at her in the street. So yeah, even his family isn't sympathetic to him. Hulk is most hated there is. Poor Hulk, but yeah, it makes sense. There's an in-canon thing where he doesn't kill, but it's very much an okay, sure, this is so we can like him thing, like Hal was Parallax, or the Phoenix was a Force, or it was Thanos' clone's memory. They're all alive, like the people in Man of Steel or all these victims from season 1 of Arrow. One guy got an arrow to the neck, he's fine. Number 10. Fight Man. So Fight Man is designed to be a character that everyone hates. He's meant to be brash, annoying, and awful. His one-shot comic demonstrates this perfectly, which I mostly want to tell you about because the tagline is "one shot is all he needs," which is so corny yet memorable, it's infuriating. Fight Man regularly destroys the city, injures the very people he's trying to help, is broke, so is constantly trying to sell merch that no one wants. He had to move back in with his parents and he doesn't even appreciate them. He had 15 sidekicks that he got killed, and the whole city eventually sues him. So yes, the hate, we have consensus. Deserved. He's a terrible hero. He gets the job done, but at tremendous cost to the city. He also has Freakazoid's haircut. Fight Man is very 90s. He's meant to be a joke, and some of them do land. I think my favorite is when one of his villains comes down to the legal offices where he's trying to deal with his ex-wife, trying to get out of alimony, breaks down the wall and is all, "You better come out here or she's dead." And Fight Man is like, "Okay, fine, do it." So his villain goes, "Oh, okay, let's just have a normal fight then." The 90s was way more self-aware than people give it credit for. Number 9. Guy Gardner. So Guy Gardner is a Green Lantern. He first debuted in Green Lantern Volume 2, number 59 back in 1968, and he wasn't always the brash jerk he is known as today. That happened in the 80s when his character was completely revamped from, well, mild-mannered and not really being used to a, and I quote, jingoistic parody of an ultra-macho red-blooded American male. Quote time. When I took over Green Lantern, John Stewart was the GL, but everybody expected Hal Jordan to come back and relegate John to backup duty once again. I decided that John deserved better, So I asked myself, why can't there be 2 GLs? And that led to, why can't there be more than 2? That eventually led to the GL Corps, but along the way I decided to resurrect the lost GL, Guy Gardner, who had been terminally bland and then brain damaged, a completely useless character as things stood. I was being a good soldier, trying to help my friend Dick Giordano sell the book, and it turned out to be the second biggest mistake of my entire career, because ever since, DC has claimed that since Joe and I didn't create the original Guy Gardner, our completely new take counts for nothing. But the damage was done. Guy was the jerk of every team he was on, knocked out by Batman with 1 punch. They've toned it down in recent years, but he's still considered hot-headed and a bit of a loose cannon, and well, rude. So it's understandable why some people hate him, particularly in canon. Still not over that him, Ice, and Superman love triangle. Lots of people like how Guy is because it makes him different. He definitely stands out. But when you need a hero, do you need someone who's gonna moon you and make fun of his allies who are doing poorly? He'll get the job done in a pinch. Hey, when you pull a massive character 180 like that and make it something other characters react to, it lands for some people and not for others. Number 8, Star Fox. Now whenever I put Star Fox on a list, people have strong feelings. And some people think I'm talking about the game. For a moment, just a brief flash. Star Fox first debuted in Iron Man number 55 back in 1973. He is Eros, brother of Thanos, and while people didn't think a lot about his pheromone date rape powers at first, this would become a plot point. Star Fox would be put on trial for sexual assault when married women came forward claiming that he had been using his powers on them to seduce them. The panels are quite horrifying. They don't even remember, and he's all, "You're welcome, he just banged a superhero." He's being defended by Jennifer Walters, aka the She-Hulk, but then she starts to suspect that he used his powers like this on her. And you know what? She's not right. She just has poor judgment. Star Fox? Really, Jennifer? But she has to Hulk out and get him mind probed to find this out, which also mind probing, that's a whole other kettle of fish. But what he did do was he did make her fall in love with and marry John Jameson. You see what they did there? This was a way to retcon another marriage out of existence. Comics hate marriage, unless you're reading Sue. But wait, this was all Thanos' fault. He implanted a memory in his mind that made him unstable, and that's why he used his powers this way, so not his fault. Yeah, that solved nothing. And whenever you make a character a rapist like this, you give the next writer an impossible task. A curveball, because in canon the characters don't want anything to do with him, and outside of it, people don't really want to either. It's a hard thing to get behind, especially with such a weak sauce explanation. False memories from a Thanos clone made him do it. If the memory is fake, we cannot litigate. He's still being sidelined because of this. People get mad about people not liking Star Fox for this, because they feel like he was a good character who got dealt a bad arc, or also because of insert current year comics. Let's leave Star Fox alone for now.
Number 7, Ronan the Accuser. So before Ronan entered the MCU, he was a complex character in the comics. A villain sometimes, but one who had a lot of depth. And then the MCU came along and apparently they just had to have him. And to be honest, they sort of ruined him. In Captain Marvel, we get to see him more as he is presented in the comics, a Kree accuser who fights for and with the Supreme Intelligence. But Lee Pace is fantastic. What they've decided to do with his character in the cinematic universe is kinda just make him the butt of all the jokes. He has a dance-off with Star-Lord, he makes this face when confronted by Captain Marvel. And he is presented as a pawn of Thanos. He freaking goes up against Thanos in the comics. What is happening? Number 6, Norman Osborn. Osborn deserves the hate from anyone who loves Peter Parker, our friendly neighborhood Spidey. He has probably committed the most vile atrocities against him, as someone who always seems to be targeting those closest to Peter. He slept with Gwen Stacy, got her pregnant, and then after she had the babies, killed her. In fact, he kills Gwen more than once in the comics. He also preys on Aunt May and on Flash Thompson's addiction to alcohol. Oh, and he also makes MJ think her baby with Peter is stillborn when it's not. Yeah, and he also kidnaps their baby while they mourn its death. Wow. Number 5, Yon-Rogg. A guy whose motivations are based around the fact that he just can't get a date. Yon-Rogg is kinda the worst. Not only is this presented in the comics as the only real motivation for him hating Mar-Vell, but later he seems to have almost no real reason to become Miss Marvel's nemesis, other than to spite his old enemy, who is Miss Marvel's friend and former lover. So you'd think when Mar-Vell died that, you know, maybe that might end. Maybe he could let it go. Nope. Apparently, the feud has gotten so great between him and Ms. Marvel that even after Mar-Vell's death, when Carol takes up the mantle of Captain Marvel, he decides to build a new Kree city on top of New York, squishing it, just to spite her. He does this as a result as well of the fact that when he calls up the Kree to tell them he has Captain Marvel in his grasp and would like to return home and be rewarded, they basically just roll their eyes at him and hang up on him. So yeah, that's the level of villain he often is. The Kree don't even care. No respect. Number 4. Black Mask. What would a hated supervillain list be without some of Batman's villains, am I right? Black Mask easily makes the cut for being one of the sickest ones out there. This Batman supervillain is also a nemesis of Catwoman. He goes so far as to kidnap Catwoman's sister Maggie and her husband. He then kills Catwoman's brother-in-law in cold blood in front of Maggie and forces her into cannibalism, making her eat her deceased husband. Ugh. Number 3. Talia. I'm sure no one is surprised about Talia's appearance on this list. This Batman supervillain and sometimes friend and lover is a complex one. While she is often seen as helping Batman in the comics and both sort of have a forbidden love thing going on, Talia has also raped Batman. And as a result of that, she became pregnant, didn't tell Batman, and then years later dropped their son off on his doorstep and was basically just like, he's your problem now. And Damian is often presented as being a problem for Batman, who is not the best at, the dad stuff. Though when your 10-year-old son randomly gets dropped in your lap and has a ton of attitude and is a trained assassin, I don't really know who would be good at dealing with that. Parenting is hard. Number 2. Joker. Where to start with the Joker? There are so many reasons to hate this insane supervillain. He paralyzed Barbara Gordon. He killed Sarah Essen, Commissioner Gordon's second wife. He actually used a baby to disarm her. Yeah, he threw a baby at her to make her drop her gun, knowing that she would catch the baby. He full-on skinned a man. He made Harley insane and gave her major Stockholm syndrome. And he's also tried to kill her a bunch. And if that's not reason enough to hate him, he also killed China. Yeah. When he is Emperor Joker and has the powers of Mr. Mxyzptlk, he shrinks China down and just eats them, cracking awful jokes about eating Chinese food. He killed billions of people there, what? Number 1. Purple Man. Kilgrave uses mind control to get others to do his bidding. He is particularly powerful, though his influence doesn't really work on everyone. Still, as we've already discussed multiple times here at Top 10 Nerd, persuasion powers do not belong to superheroes, and Kilgrave is a perfect example of why that is. He is a serial rapist who uses his powers to his advantage. If you thought he was awful in the Jessica Jones Netflix series, you don't even know. The comic series Alias by Brian Michael Bendis also does a great job of exploring a similar journey for Jones via the comics, so if you'd rather read than watch to learn more, I'd recommend checking that out. But beyond the crimes we see him commit in that storyline, he also often impregnates his victims, and in 2014 we saw him round up his purple children in the comics, who have inherited his powers, and then he turns them into sort of little troop of supervillain kids.
Number 10. Galahad from Insufferable. Insufferable is a digital comic from 2012 written by Mark Waid that was meant to showcase the power of digital, that a comic could be digital only and flourish. This did not happen, and it actually did get a trade paperback release. And Insufferable slipped under the radar for many people, and digital in general has plateaued. However, what was it about? Well, it was about a father and son dynamic duo team who had had a massive public falling out, wherein their secret identities were revealed. Galahad was fulfilling the role of Boy Wonder, and used the super identity reveal that he caused to catapult himself to social media fame. Galahad is big on the Twitter. He's on forums, he stays up late arguing with trolls, he lets his dad do the legwork solving crimes, shows up, takes a selfie, and claims he did all of it himself on social media, or at least that his dad is old and in the way. He sells merch and gets sponsorship deals, and as you can imagine, eventually he gets a Twitter mob turning against him. This is when he has just run into bad press, and also a bit of a stint of being an ineffectual hero. Galahad is a brat, more concerned with branding himself and stopping crime. For those who see through his facade and call him out, he does deserve some of the hate he gets. Most of it. He's low on the list because he's relatively harmless, more lame than anything else. Number 9. Crackerjack. We're heading back to Astro City. Yes, it's all happening. Crackerjack first appears in Astro City number 5, and it's instantly set up as a hero that others are annoyed with. Flamboyant and flashy, he loves to swoop into a situation and take all the credit, even though sometimes he's more of a hindrance than a help. The thing is, the public likes him. He's gregarious and charming, but behind the scenes it's said that, and I quote, he depends on luck, He is jealous of others, he does sloppy work, he steals credit for the achievements of others. Harsh. No one seems to know who Cracker Jack really is. His superhero identity takes up much of his persona. His arc culminates in him being career-endingly injured in the process of teaming up with one of Astro City's enemies to attempt to bolster his failing body, as he was starting to age out of the hero business after being active for over 20 years. Teaming up with an enemy for one's own selfish reasons didn't endear him to all the heroes, though some did understand. He's still the same Ray he always was though, and is working to recover from his injuries with the help of Quarrel, who he still hasn't told his name to. So yeah, does he deserve the hate? Sorta. Kind of. Most of the time. Most of the time lands you at number 9. Number 8. Damian Wayne. Controversial, I know, and I can feel the keys. How dare you. Damian Wayne's the GOAT. Well, here's the thing. Damian Wayne ranges a lot based on how he's written, and in canon there are many who can't stand him, or have to put up with him in a kind of, oh, Damian, what a precocious child, calling women trollops and whores, belittling his father for his own rape, kidnapping Superboy, even though they become good friends, and that was a very cute comic. He takes his father's paranoia to a whole new level, and just in general is rude to everyone. Damian is not as hated as he would be by the other heroes because he is a child, so he gets a lot of leeway and the potential to grow out of it, which he sometimes does until a writer decides to take him back to base. Damian is constantly being forced to learn to get along with others, thanks to his upbringing with Ra's and Talia and the League of Assassins. To say he's antisocial would be an understatement, though a lot of it does stem from a place of insecurity. Damian is constantly mean to those around him, no matter how much they help or go to the mat for him. They give him infinite chances though, but for those who give up and give in to the hate, it's not that undeserved. Yes, he's 13, I'm aware. All I'm saying is those futures where he turns out evil, I believe. Still, I hold out hope for good writers and nuanced portrayals. It happens. Let's just stay away from the Damian who tells his father to cover his drink. That's disgusting.
If this trollop provides some carnal release, so be it. But I needn't bring up your past poor choices in women, including but not limited to my mother.
Damian, I'm not...
Not that I'm on great terms here, mind you. However, I must insist that you use protection. And another thing, cover your drink.
Goodbye, Damian.
Number 7. Spider-Man. Spider-Man has a notoriously hard time with his public image. Despite always trying to do the right thing, a large portion of New York still calls him a menace and calls for his arrest. A lot of this, of course, is due to J. Jonah Jameson, who has hated the webbed wall crawler since almost his very first appearance, and has used the Daily Bugle to spin every story that comes his way about Spidey to somehow be his fault in branding him a public menace. Due to this campaign, a lot of people assume the worst of Spider-Man and refuse to give him the benefit of the doubt. To be fair, there are a lot of people who also really like Spider-Man, with him having had quite a few times where the public has rallied around him and celebrated his heroism. This can be easy to forget for Spidey, as the people who like him tend to be more relaxed with their appreciation, whereas the Spider-Man haters are so loud in their distaste that it makes it sound as though everyone in New York hates the hero. Number 6. Guy Gardner. Earth's third Green Lantern, introduced in Green Lantern Volume 2, number 59, Guy Gardner is known just as much for being an arrogant jerk as he is for his truly bizarre haircut. Guy grew up in a cruel household, never feeling as close to his parents as his siblings did. This is likely why he has allowed his position as a Green Lantern to inflate his ego so much. Despite having the same powers as the other Green Lanterns, this doesn't stop him from expressing his perceived superiority. This inflated sense of self often makes him clash with other superheroes in the Justice League, most notably Batman. This conflict came to a head in Justice League number 5, when Guy challenged Batman to a fight, even claiming that he could beat the Caped Crusader without the use of his Green Lantern ring. To the delight of every other League member in attendance, this resulted in Batman knocking Guy unconscious with one punch to the face. Despite Guy having earned the respect of other heroes in the years since, he still rubs a lot of people the wrong way due to his ego and his attitude. Number 5. Scarlet Witch. Wanda Maximoff has had a lot of haters from all sides over the years. As a character who we believed was a mutant for much of her history, she faces a lot of hatred and prejudice from the average citizens of Earth, which wasn't helped by her joining an organization that called itself the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. She eventually switched teams and became an Avenger, but suffered a real PR disaster after she changed reality so that mutants were the majority and Magneto was in charge. When that didn't pan out, she took away the powers of the vast majority of mutants in the infamous M-Day story, making her a pariah in the mutant community. The mutant community hates Scarlet Witch so much that they have a ceremony called the Crucible dedicated to passing down stories about how much Wanda sucks. Wanda has been dealt an awful lot of awful hands over the years and is a sympathetic character, but this is one hero who I totally get the in-universe hate for. Number 4. Deadpool. Deadpool is a character who is beloved by fans, but not by the other characters in his book. Due to his horrid appearance, many people will throw up or run away at the mere sight of him. He is ultra-violent, which makes civilians afraid of him. He has a really warped sense of humor, which makes the other superheroes want to avoid him out of annoyance. And his tendency to kill people makes a lot of the less morally flexible heroes avoid him. He is also apparently really smelly, which I'm sure doesn't help, but despite this, he does long for connection, having dreams of joining the Avengers or the X-Men, but constantly being rejected by the teams. For years, he had a rather one-sided bromance with Spider-Man, with Spidey having no interest in hanging out with someone he considered a total psycho. However, after much persistence, he has bonded with Spider-Man, having even gotten each other matching sweaters for Christmas and referring to themselves as bad besties for life. It's a shame that few other heroes have the patience to get to know Deadpool that Spider-Man was able to muster. Number 3. The Comedian. None of the vigilantes featured in Alan Moore's Watchmen are exactly beloved figures in the public eye. Due to their violence and lack of accountability, the general public protested their existence and they were eventually outlawed. But even among the Watchmen, there was one member who was despised by almost everyone he came across. Edward Blake, aka the Comedian. He started his crime-fighting career at 16, although he would sometimes beat the victims of the crime as well as the perpetrators. While part of the superhero team the Minutemen, he forced himself on fellow teammate Silk Spectre, causing him to be attacked by another Minuteman named Hooded Justice. He was banned from the group for his actions, but Hooded Justice soon disappeared, with the implication being that the Comedian was responsible. He didn't make any friends on his new team, the Crime Busters, when he set the meeting's visual aids on fire and told everyone that the team was a joke. He fought in the Vietnam War, where he didn't do anything that wasn't needlessly cruel, even ending the life of a pregnant woman who was carrying his child. Upon his return to the States, he unleashed his fury on a group of protesters, often opening fire on crowds with rubber bullets with little provocation. He was such a piece of work that even once he was thrown out of his window and killed, most of the people who knew him were surprised, but not exactly sad. Number 2. The X-Men. The X-Men are a team of mutants who work together to save the planet, as well as protect their kind while fostering a better relationship with humanity. Unfortunately, mutant kind is unreasonably hated by much of humanity in the Marvel Universe. It's hard to say exactly why this is. After all, prejudice rarely makes sense, but it could be that the humans feel threatened by the fact that mutants are the next step in evolution, and they fear that they will be replaced if they don't stand up to them. It could just be a fear of people who are different. Either way, the X-Men's mutanthood results in them being hated by large portions of humanity, no matter how much good they try to do. A really good example of this is what happens to Goldballs in Uncanny X-Men Volume 3, number 35. He defeats a villain using his power to shoot gold balls, and he becomes a media sensation, getting booked on The Tonight Show and appearing on magazine covers, but once the public finds out he's a mutant, he is hated and attacked by the very people who were cheering him on. Number 1. The Hulk. Ever since he was pelted by gamma rays, Bruce Banner has had the unfortunate condition of transforming into a giant green monster whenever he becomes angry or outraged. When in his Hulk form, the Jade Giant has a tendency to cause a lot of destruction during his emotional outbursts. He will take out a building no problem, but what the people of the Marvel Universe often fail to realize is that he just wants to be left alone. Hulk goes out of his way not to kill civilians during his rampages and fights, with him having apparently been able to avoid them for the most part. But being a giant angry monster, the people are still very afraid of him, and the damage he has caused giving them a somewhat justifiable reason for hating Hulk. There have been times where public opinion has come around on him, such as when he was granted a full pardon and even given a parade, but it is never long before the crowd turns on him and sends the military after him in an attempt to destroy him.